Have you ever met someone who seemed cold or distant, and yet you sensed there was more to their silence than simple indifference? What if that distance wasn't a flaw, but a carefully built shield? In this video, we journey into the quiet, suffering of those who appear hard to love, not because they lack emotion, but because they've learned emotion isn't safe. Drawing on the insights of Carl Jung, we'll explore how unresolved pain silently reshapes identity, how silence becomes survival, and how awareness can transform suffering into healing. Stay with me until the end, because what we often label as difficult is sometimes just someone still learning how to survive. And before we go deeper, take a moment to subscribe to Deep Psyche, where we explore the unseen, the unspoken, and the forgotten truths of the soul. Now let's begin. Some people don't look wounded. They look composed, controlled, maybe even emotionally detached. But often, what we mistake as indifference is the psyche's quiet cry for safety. Because pain that isn't processed doesn't disappear. It transforms. As Jung taught, unhealed suffering retreats into the unconscious, shaping how we relate to ourselves, others, and the world. You see it not in words but in patterns: withdrawal, hypervigilance, emotional numbness. These aren't flaws, they're defense systems, not who someone is, but who they had to become. The psyche doesn't choose these strategies logically. It builds them instinctively out of necessity. Someone may seem aloof or overly rational, not because they don't crave connection, but because connection once meant pain. Jung called these inner defense patterns complexes, emotional structures born from trauma. They're not weaknesses, they're protections, automatic, unconscious, and often invisible even to the one wearing them. The deeper the wound, the more seamless the armor, especially when the pain came from love, from family, from trust, the places that were supposed to be safe. Vulnerability begins to feel dangerous. So walls are built: detachment, skepticism, self-reliance, not because closeness isn't desired, but because closeness once betrayed them. The unconscious becomes a gatekeeper, scanning even peace for danger. Over time, these defenses become the persona, the social mask Jung described. But for many, the mask becomes a full-time role. They seem strong, capable, even admirable. But behind that is someone who learned early that being seen can hurt. The longer the mask is worn, the harder it becomes to remove. Healing doesn't ask us to tear it off. It simply asks us to loosen it, to let the soul breathe through the cracks. But not all pain builds walls. Sometimes it opens something else. Some who've suffered become exquisitely sensitive. They feel everything. They read silence, tone, micro-expressions. They comfort instinctively because they know what it feels like to hurt alone. Jung called this the wounded healer, someone who helps others because they carry a wound of their own. But this gift has a shadow. When empathy isn't grounded in self-awareness, it becomes projection. They give care to escape their own pain. They become the strong one, the emotional anchor, the listener, and somewhere along the way, they vanish from their own life. Overgiving without boundaries becomes self-erasure. True healing, Jung would say, begins when the healer turns inward, when they offer to themselves the same love they so freely give. That's when compassion becomes wholeness, not a quiet sacrifice, but a conscious act of care. If you found something meaningful so far, share this video with someone who might need it. Now there's one more layer we must explore, because sometimes the past doesn't stay in the past. It shapes how we think, feel, and love. Some griefs have no name. They aren't about what was lost, but what never was. The safety that didn't come. The love that never arrived. The apology that never came. These are invisible losses. When unspoken, they echo through the present. Jung said, "What we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. That fate shows up as repeated patterns, emotional disconnection, overthinking, a life spent analyzing instead of feeling. The mind becomes refuge, control becomes a shield." But Jung warned, insight alone isn't healing. Knowing why you're in pain doesn't dissolve it. Feeling does. For those who've been deeply wounded, feeling is exactly what they've been trained to avoid. But healing begins when we allow those feelings, grief, fear, rage, to surface, to pass through the body, to be named, to be held. Grief, when honored, becomes a doorway. It doesn't erase the past, but it gives it a place. The scar remains, but it no longer bleeds. And when pain is named, felt, and accepted, it stops controlling the future. The psyche softens, the mask loosens, and at last, life is lived not in reaction to what was, but in connection to what is. So if someone seems hard to love, look closer. Often, it has less to do with who they are, and everything to do with what they've endured. Jung never saw suffering as the end of the story, but the beginning of a deeper one. Because when pain is brought into awareness, it stops defining us. It becomes a threshold, a call not just to heal, but to live, more consciously, more fully, more freely. If this reflection resonated with you, if you saw even a glimpse of your own journey in these words, take a moment to subscribe to Deep Psyche. Here we explore the language of the soul, the truth behind behavior, and the kind of healing that begins not in the world but within. And if you've made it this far, leave a comment below with the words, "I'm learning to listen to my pain." That phrase tells me you're not just watching, you're awakening, and that alone is a powerful beginning. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep walking the path inward.